Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 670. Today we're going to take a look at Tapestry. This is a new game coming out from Stonemaier Games, designed by Jamie Stegmaier. It's a 1 to 5 player civilization game, and this game has quite a lot of buzz recently, and there is a really in-depth how to play from Watch It Played. So I'm not really actually going to do very much of any kind of rules explanation, but I am going to go down to the table and kind of review it as I go. I did this a long time ago when I did a review for Eclipse, and at that point there was also like a boatload of videos out there about it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and kind of review all the parts I kind of like and don't like as I go through the components of the game and show you different stuff. But then I'll also jump back here to my face and go through my 3 pillars of review and kind of give you some closing thoughts and that kind of thing. So let's jump down to the table. This is kind of expecting that you have a good idea how the game works. Maybe you already played it, maybe you watched the Watch It Played video or some other video. But if you kind of want to know my general impressions and sort of my feelings about some of the different interlocking pieces of this game, then let's go for it. Okay, so I've got everything kind of set up here on the table. Here you can see the main map board. I've got some player board stuff and some cards off to the side. So like I said in the intro, I'm just going to kind of break things down, sort of review them as I go through kind of the components and some of the different mechanics, not just a more straightforward walkthrough like I normally do. But then of course I'll jump back to my talking head and we'll go through all the normal things. So first let's go ahead and take a look at this world map. So it's composed of a couple of things. You can see you've got different sort of like technology trees or tracks here around the edges, and then you have your map in the center. Now we're starting here, so we start with our 2 pillars, and then as you start to conquer and explore territory, you'll start to mark pillars out here, and you might explore, you might get a tile like this, and then you're trying to arrange it so that it's matching theoretically different terrain. That's kind of a neat thing. You're going to get, resources like that's going to give you a technology upgrade. This one is going to give you a new worker resource as you put this out here. And of course you might start running into other players. So maybe the red player is over here and they start to explore, but only 2 tokens can be on any of these different tiles here. So as red explores, they may come in here and then conquer this territory, and all they're going to do is just knock me down there. I'm going to lose control of that territory, but I can still try to conquer and explore other areas and kind of work my way around and get a certain number of territories. You're going to score points for controlling different amounts of territory. You also get some bonus points for conquering that center island. The first player to get out there, let's say red got out there first, they're going to get an achievement. They're going to get 10 points for that. But if I work my way in there, or somebody else does on a later turn, then they're going to knock red down, and then that person's going to get an achievement of 5 points. So there is some incentive to make it to the center of the island. In the great scheme of things, 10 or 5 points is not really a whole lot of points. So it's not the driving force. You could very much kind of hang back and maintain your own territory. And based on the civilization that you're dealt, or that you choose, then you might do that. So that's going to enforce the land map and grow in different ways based on who's in play. But I will say I do like this portion of the game. Now this is the 4 and 5 player side of the map. The 1, 2, and 3 player side of the map is on the other side. It's a smaller map. In this case, a large part of the reason that I actually prefer it with a larger player count, which I'll talk about at the end of the video, is because you've just got a lot more stuff going on, a lot more interesting things happening. There's going to be more civilizations in play. They're going to interact with this map in a variety of different ways. You've got like traders and isolationists and militaristic civilizations that are going to behave and interact and have different goals out here. And that just makes it more interesting. It makes it more of an epic feel. And the part that you might say there's battles or encounters or attacking that might turn some people off, doesn't turn me off, but it might turn others off, is very vanilla here, and I don't mind it. Like, I don't need to sink my teeth into somebody's throat to enjoy a game. I don't mind it. But I think this is a good decision, not to Monday morning quarterback, but I think this is a good decision. It's satisfying for me to play through that part of it, and it's very easygoing. So if you play with folks that don't like attacking and losing all of your territory, which can happen in some civilization games, you could just get squished back into one territory or get eliminated even in some civilization games. This has none of that, and I think that's a cool thing. That's a good thing. It's visually pleasing at the end of the game when you got a whole bunch of these little tower tokens all over the place, and I like that part of it. And I also, while we're talking about it, I do like the way the exploration works, where you try to align the different tiles to just kind of, just to kind of force you to make a little bit of a decision in terms of, what tiles you might place out, because you might be looking at it in terms of, well, what resources does it give me, or how many points will I get, and so on. So it just gives you a little bit of a decision point, and it'll just make the map kind of grow in different ways. Not really too much to that in terms of game mechanics, but sometimes you might say at the end of the game, maybe, I want some extra points here. Or you might have some civilizations to actually interact with the terrain types, but it's usually not worth worrying about too much. It's just a few extra bonus points. Now we'll come back to this map. I'm going to talk about these technology tracks here, for lack of a better word, in a minute. So you're going to have 3 total player boards in front of you. We're looking at 2 of them now. Here's the main player board. Everybody's got the same one. And then everybody's also going to have kind of a terrain board. You can see here, this is number 4. This is the desert. This matches my starting location on the board. Typically, you'll deal these out, and then people will sit kind of ideally positioned around those spots. And they're going to have different types of terrain where they're going to build their capital city, and that's what this board here represents. And if you can see, there's various little dots and things like on them. If you take a look at grasslands, you can see you've got this kind of line through here. So over the course of the game, you're going to be building these buildings on your main player board and then placing them over here and filling up spaces. You might actually get cool buildings like this here and cover up a whole bunch of spaces, which I'll talk about in a minute. So I like this part of the game here. This is a kind of it's very abstract, but based on which civilization, again, you get, there's going to be some different ways to kind of interact with this, and ways to sort of have sort of combo-rific turns. Because you can see here in the upper right-hand corner, anytime you fill in one of these 3x3 squares, you're going to generate a free resource, and resources are at a premium in this game. You've got this track here to, track which types of resources you're using. And so if you can have a turn where you put a building out and you finish that last square, gives you another resource, that's going to usually give you at least hopefully another action or access to a better action that you can take on the different technology tracks. And so kind of the interplay between, building stuff out here and positioning it right, kind of timing it right so that you get that extra resource at the right time, is just it's a really cool, interesting, not too complicated puzzle. Now, of course, you also will score victory points at the end of at your income turns for getting lines of columns and rows here filled in, and you basically get 1 point per. But if you unlock more of your farm buildings here, we'll just take these off here, you'll see you start to get more points for each of those rows and columns. So if you unlock all 3 of these here, you get 3 points per column in a row. So if you really horn in on that, you can get a decent amount of points out of that. And so each of these building types sort of ties to a different technology track, a different resource. So you can see as you uncover this one here, you're going to get more worker resources every time you do income. This one here is going to be more of this money resource. And these are going to help you with the technology cards. And then we'll take a look at these here. This one is more for exploring and things like that, and this is more military. So the way that all of this interacts is not complicated at all, and it's very straightforward, but it's also very satisfying and very thematic, frankly, in terms of the types of buildings that you're building, the type of city that you're going to have, the type of civilization you're going to have. And it's a really straightforward and easygoing way to do it. And I really like just this whole interaction here of these 2 player boards here. Now, the 3rd player board is where we come into a bit of a conundrum. Now, what these are 16 civilizations that you can get in the game. And this is simultaneously probably the best and the worst part of the game. So each player is going to be randomly shuffled and dealt 2 of these civilizations to start the game. So you can see I've got the traders, and then I've got here the militants. And as you can see, the rules for these, just visually, are very, very different. There's a lot kind of going on here. And these are, in fact, very different styles of games that you're going to be playing based on which civilization you get. And this is one of the coolest parts of the game, because each time you play it, it's going to make you look at the game in a completely different way. And that's awesome. Now, where the problem comes in is, let's use our example here. And this was made abundantly clear to me when I compared the Alchemists and the Heralds in a game that I had played. This was in a 5-player game. I had the Heralds. I did very well. I won the game. I got 281 points. And then another player who also, he played just fine. I lapped him, he got like 172 points. And so he had the Alchemist. And there is without a doubt no, to me, argument that this one is 10 times better than the Alchemist in terms of the power and the ability that it uses. So if you know anything about the game, the Alchemist, when it becomes your income turn, you're going to take this science die and you're going to roll it. And let's say I roll military like I did there. I'm going to mark the military icon on the track, and then I can stop. And then I can move up the military track. I don't get any of the benefits of that, but I can move up it, which is good, but you miss out on the benefits. It's not necessarily good just to move up and not get the benefits, because a lot of times, yeah, you spend resources normally to move up these tracks, but you also want the ability and the thing to happen as well. But okay, so I rolled military, so let's roll again. So now, oh, look at, I rolled military. So now I bust and I get nothing. But let's say I had rolled military the first time, and then I rolled science the second time, and I got super lucky, and then I rolled the technology tree. So I say, okay, I'm good. I'm not going to push my luck anymore. I'm going to move up each of these tracks once. Again, not getting the benefit. Maybe getting an extra bonus building if I pass through one of the kind of the category markers on it. So you could get a bonus building before somebody else. So it might be worth it to do that. But again, you can bust, and that's it. Okay, so that kind of stinks. And you could do what I did and just roll 2 in a row and not really get a whole lot going on in your turn. That's no good. This one here, the Heralds, vastly better. So here I get some markers on my board here, and you'll know, if you know the rules, over the course of the game, you're going to get these Tapestry cards and play them on your income turns. Well, what happens here is, in the case of this particular civilization, you can actually have played a Tapestry card on your very first income turn, which is the turn everybody takes. And then from there on out, you can take, at the beginning of your next income turns, take a cube and mark one of your previously played Tapestry cards. You can only do that once per card, and then activate it again if it has this when played at thing on there. So everybody usually gets to activate their Tapestry cards, 4 times, or 3 times actually usually, but in this case, it's 4 times up to 8 if I get to do all of these again. And these Tapestry cards, especially if you get this civilization, you're like, guess what I'm doing? I'm fishing for Tapestry cards, and it's not hard to get Tapestry cards in the game. There's a lot of things you can do that give you Tapestry cards. I think by the end of the game, when I had these guys, I had 7 or 8 in my hand. That was by the end of the game, and I had, many more that I had like discarded for points and things like that. But then you get to activate these, and these are just going to give you, I think I got at least 50 some points out of just this ability here. And whereas this one, not really giving you many points out of that. And it's just impossible, I think, for this one to be as good as this one. So that's a big problem. Now, however, the fellow that played the Alchemist, he had a blast. He loved it. He was doing fine. And it was his first time he was playing. But just as people play, there's going to be an issue here with the balance of these. And so I could break down many of these, and I've kind of scanned through them, and I haven't seen all these in play, but a lot of them I have seen or played or watched other people play them. And there's just a very interesting kind of balance. And they even mentioned in the rule book, like they're going to track, which civilizations win, and then maybe put in some kind of handicapping and stuff. And that's cool, and that's fine. And I kind of wish these were categorized into, these are really competitive, and these are really funky and wonky, and these are just, kind of the middle tier ones. So when you played a game, you could say, oh, we're playing middle tier civilization, so we'll throw these 4 out. These are too powerful or whatever. Or instead of draw 2, keep 1, maybe draw 2, and I'm like, well, I know these are garbage, so I'm going to draw 2 more, and then, keep one of the other ones. And then, maybe I'm stuck with them. Because here's the other thing, is when I play it, this is, like, honestly, I don't think I would be that much of a hard ass about it. But I don't want people just like picking their favorite civilization all the time. You're like, well, I'm only playing this if I play the Futurists. And then it's like, well, okay, well, let's play a different game then, because I don't want to play like that. I want to play through all of these and get random ones and try to figure out new things. I don't want to this isn't the type of game where I just want to be a Poindexter about winning. There is a lot of other good things about it. But this part of it is very much like a high wire act that I think you kind of stumble and maybe don't fall off the wire, but you trip and you land on something funny, and it's no good. But so anyway, that's kind of this. I'll talk more about this part in the review. So we were just talking about Tapestry cards, and I love this part of the game. Now there's one very interesting sort of enigma about it. As you can see in my example, I had actually played Oil Magnate, as the very first Tapestry card, right when mankind or whatever is trying to make fire. Well, you don't usually start drilling for oil at the beginning of your civilization. Or you don't also have industrialism at the beginning of your civilization. Or in that case, you know, you wouldn't do industrialization at the beginning and then have age of sail at the end. But this part actually doesn't really bother me because I think that's actually kind of funky, and I like that. And I really feel like these are just kind of mislabeled, whereas if you think of these terms in a little bit more of an abstract, it's not that this is the industrial revolution of the planet Earth in this whatever epoch that we're currently moving through the galaxy in. It's something different for this planet. And the Age of Sail is something different. Because, you know, the abilities and stuff are sort of loosely tied to sort of the general abstract concept of this. So this, you can see, look at the industrialism one. Let's take a look at that. It says, this era, whenever you invent a technology, gain the first benefit, that's what the circle means, on it. The card remains in the bottom row for now. So at this point, you're getting technologies and you're getting the benefit right away without having to upgrade them. So is that really industrialism? It kind of feels like it, like it's in the ballpark. So I think it's all right. So it's more of a general idea of a civilization. And that's what kind of this game is. It's more like the idea of a civilization game without actually being a civilization game, which again, I don't have a problem with, but we'll talk more about that in the review. But I just kind of wanted to show you that example there. And before we move on though, there is a similar example here with the technology cards. You can see, like, here's a calendar, which you might invent after you invent vaccines, or you might have anesthesia and then dynamite, and these all kind of come out in different orders. Now these are tied to kind of various aspects of the game. Like you can see, this is tied to getting some more of your military buildings that are on this track here built. This one here is about moving up the science track, scoring points on the science track at the end of the game, theoretically. The calendar is kind of a general thing, some basic points there. Gives you a resource, which is good. That'll help you get another turn, right? So there's some good interaction in the way that these mechanics work and kind of the timing of upgrading your technologies. And a lot of civilizations interact with the technologies in a lot of cool different ways. A lot of the Tapestry cards themselves interact with the technologies. So the game really wants you to, in some cases, go after the technologies, and it's interesting to kind of see them upgrade and everything. And the other thing about the technologies, which I really like, and a lot of cards actually do this in the game, is you can see this little symbol here. And this means to upgrade the technology to the final level, somebody, you or the person to your left or right, needs to be at level 2 on the military track. That's a cool thing. That's just a nice little nod there to sort of the sharing of ideas and technologies and civilizations that most civilization games completely ignore. Like, there's no sharing. Like in Through the Ages, when you build whatever it is, the bronze mill, the bronze, you know, mine, nobody else can build bronze, which is total crock. Because if a country is making bronze, you better believe somebody I know in that country is going to come over to my country and tell me how to do it. So I like this kind of idea here. And so as long as somebody is up to this level, then hey, yeah, you can build dynamite. Again, the order of the technologies that you invent them don't make a whole lot of sense, but this little kind of idiosyncrasy here with this is really interesting and cool. And that's a good thing. So let's take a look at one of the technology tracks, and I'll probably we're looking at the one that I think is probably actually, like, on the surface the most boring in some ways, but it's one that I find that I don't really want to do, because I want to do, based on the civilization, the technology or the military or the science track. And the exploration track, maybe I just haven't, you know, played a civilization that really focuses on exploration, but you're gonna have to do a little bit of some of these, like just a tiny bit. Like, you don't have to get up each of them halfway. You probably want to focus on like 2 of them and try to max out 2 of them, and then take a little bit of action on some of the others. So let's take a look at this. So as you move up, let's zoom in. You're going to pay a resource on your board and then move up, because this says pay any one resource. So I go here, I'm going to draw 2 more of these tiles, and then when I move up to the next one, I'm going to then explore and put one of those tiles out. That's what that icon means. But now I have also the option to spend another resource and get another Tapestry card. You should probably always do that if you can, because having more Tapestry cards gives you a better handle and a better probability of having Tapestry cards that work well with your civilization, or at least work well with your game plan. So I think it's very important to buy those extra Tapestry cards. And then up here I get another chance to maybe explore again, and then, or again, build that building. So I like that the way that this is sort of streamlined, because in a lot of civilizations, like spend resources to build. It's like, okay, well, I can't build unless I have room to build. And so, you know, in this case, you're not building buildings on your map, but this kind of falls in line with all the stuff you spend resources on. So the way that they're sort of streamlined and integrating these tracks is just another really interesting thing about the game. And the way that you sort of go up one track and go up the other, that's kind of neat. Because as I start to go up, you can see the tracks sort of specialized. So now this one wants the little food, the mushroom, plus any other resource. And then I'm going to move up here so I can, you know, draw tiles and explore. Or I can, you know, build up here and then get points for the territories I control, because I should be expanding more territories. So I should probably be doing military. You can see kind of the indication there that you should be conquering more stuff as you explore. And then if you want to, hey, you want to spend an extra resource, you can build, and then so on. And then another thing is as you move up these tracks, you kind of get these wonders or these landmarks. So as I go up here, I'll get this landmark here. This is going to take up more space on my player board. Again, that's going to fill up and give me more resources, or typically the way it's organized will give me, you know, more extra points and things like that. But the way that these things kind of interact is very interesting, because one reason that you might explore, if you're not really into doing exploring, is, hey, when you actually explore, you're going to get resources. Well, those resources that you can use will be very specific. So maybe I actually need a very specific resource. Or I want to actually, you know, hey, I want to get another tapestry card, because maybe you had the civilization I had there. So I want tapestry cards. Or, you know, I would have a really good turn if I can upgrade one of my technologies, because typically you can only do one of those per income. So if you can get and buy some more upgrades, those upgrades can be pretty massive as you do that. So there's some good kind of interaction, and all the tracks kind of work like this in a lot of different ways. You know, and I saw some kind of gnashing online about, hey, when you do the science track, and then you just rolling a die and moving up a track, you maybe, you know, at the beginning you're not getting the benefits, but then after a while you are getting the benefits, and that's really cool. And I saw folks make great use of the science track in the games that I've played. And once you get to the top of it, it gets kind of bananas too, because you get a lot of kind of free upgrades if you spend the time and kind of just ignore the randomness in the first few upgrades. Then it starts to pay itself off, which is kind of how science works, right? So there is a lot of good interaction between, you know, these different tracks and each other. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is I've, you know, been posting on Instagram and Facebook some of the games I've been playing, and I see a lot of complaints like, hey, the buildings don't actually fit anywhere on the board. But hey, look, take a look at this. So this building here is going to cover up a 3x3 grid on your player mat. Now when I fit that on there, it doesn't perfectly like line up with all your stuff, but you just go, that should cover 3x3. So when I move my board up here like this, then I count, oh, there's a 3x3 spot there, bam. And you go, well, what does it cover? What does it not cover? Well, look at this mat here, and then it will tell you. And some of the technology cards will actually give you buildings too, and there's a nice little gridded diagram on there. So I don't think that's actually a problem. I think that's a lot of ado about nothing in terms of the functionality of these buildings here. They're fine. They look great. They're pre-painted. Like, look at them. You want to throw a wash on them, go ahead. I think they look fantastic. So that's kind of the general kind of breakdown of stuff. But let's go back to kind of the reviews, and I'll kind of dive into a little bit more deeper discussion about the game. Okay, so that was a Tapestry. So if you're one of the many folks that like to skip to the review section and skip the walkthrough, I did review some of it in the walkthrough portion, kind of as I walk through the components. But if you watch the intro, you know that. But let's jump into my 3 pillars of reviews, and I'll kind of close my thoughts out a little bit and refer a little bit to some of the walkthrough stuff I did. So player count and play time kind of mashed together. I've played it 1, 2, 3, and 5 players. I haven't played a 4-player yet. The playtime, I think, scales up, obviously, with the play count. Not every game does that, but in this one it's very, very clear. The 5-player game I had played a few times at that point. All the other players were brand new, and that took us about 3 hours. That was with the rule teach, though, maybe slightly over 3 hours. I don't know, I wasn't keeping that close a watch, but it was about 3 hours with 5 players, which is fine. I mean, I think if we had all of that group had played it again, like the next day or something, that playtime would come down probably to 2.5 hours, probably closer to 2.5, which for a 5-player kind of civilization game, if you're at 2.5 hours, I think that's not a big deal. I think with 2 players, you could play it in an hour, easy. Especially once everybody, both of you know how to play the game. Now, in terms of like which player count do I like the best, I think 5. And I'm probably sure I would like it with 4 too if I played it with that. I like having more civilizations at play. There's more kind of jockeying and stuff on the board a little bit. That's kind of depend on the civilizations that are in play though. But the interactions and things that are possible with a 5-player game are just so much greater. You've got so many more interesting powers and interactions and things to have. It plays fine at like 2-player and so on, but it's just, there's not really like a lot happening. And it doesn't feel like if you're playing a civilization game, it's not just you and one other civilization, that's just not how things work. So when you're playing a civilization game, it's almost like the more the merrier. If you think of a game like Mega Civilization, which is an outlier to be sure, but I think you can play it up to like 18 people or something. I mean, that's a civilization game, right? So the more the merrier. And to me, the playtime, if you're looking at 2 to 3 hour playtime, that's fine. You're playing a civ game. That's what it should be. Single player, it's fine. It works. It's, I don't know. It's all right. I would say learn the game that way. That's how I learned it. I thought that was interesting. But then after you play it with other people and stuff like that, it's just like, I don't know. There's no reason to play it as single player to me. There's other games that are an interesting puzzle to solve and stuff like that. Maybe try out a civilization, like its new powers. You can kind of see how it works and stuff. You're like, I really want to try this civilization, throw it down and see how it works and how it plays out. But you don't really have a good gauge, in my opinion, of how effective that civilization is or how effectively you piloted that civilization against the single player thing. Because they kind of just go up the tracks and sort of eat up things in a way that isn't that kind of interesting. I don't know. It works and it's fine. I wouldn't recommend this game if you were like, I'm only going to play the single player. I would personally not recommend Tapestry. But again, I favor the larger player count because of the style of game it is a little bit too. So that's kind of the player count, player time thing. The last thing I think it does work fine at a 2 and 3 player game. Like if somebody said, let's play a 3-player game, I would probably play it. A 2-player game, I'd be like, yeah, okay, maybe. But 3, 4, probably, and 5, I would 100% play the game if you asked me to. So let's talk about, okay, what is the game like? Well, it calls itself a civilization game. So immediately, I have to compare it to other civilization games. And there's a gamut of them. Like when you say civilization game, it doesn't necessarily mean one thing. Like I just mentioned Mega Civilization. That's basically the old classic civilization game from the 80s, kind of blown out. So it kind of goes along with that. Those are like day-long affairs. That's one type of civilization game. You've got other games like Through the Ages, which is a card game that sort of like pretends to be a civilization game. Like I get issues personal. It's a personal problem, really. That's a fine game and amazing design, but when I play that, like, let's play a civilization game, not the game that I think of is Through the Ages. That's fine. And you got Nations, which is like an inferior Through the Ages. Not my favorite kind of civilization game. My favorite is Clash of Cultures, which should be getting reprinted here in a year or two. Clash of Cultures with the expansion, mind you. That is to me a fantastic civilization, but this is not a review of that game. But when I think of civilization game, I immediately compare whatever it is to that game. This one is not necessarily comparable. The combat is non-existent in this, where it's plentiful in Clash of Cultures. The way resources work is a little bit different. It's a little bit more territorial and spatial in Clash of Cultures. And so there's a lot of things going on, and it's really hard to compare the two games other than, hey, they both call themselves a civilization game, but they're really different styles of game. Clash of Cultures is more of an Ameritrash game, whereas this is more of kind of a mid-level, or not mid-level, medium weight Euro game. So they're very, very different styles of game. And so kind of depending on your sort of tendencies, then you might like one or the other. This one falls more into the ballpark of a Deus and a Golden Ages. Those are probably my two, other than Clash of Cultures, my two kind of favorite other style of civilization games. You could say Seven Wonders or some nonsense, but that's just like a card drafting game with a civilization theme. I like Seven Wonders, don't get me wrong, but I don't play that and go civilization game. But a game that feels like a civilization game. I feel like I'm playing Sid Meier's Civilization computer game, but the board game version. Deus and Golden Ages are kind of right in that ballpark. Deus is definitely more of a card game, although this game has a lot of card play. And Golden Ages is more like a territory, area control Euro game. So if you had to, like, you put my feet to fire and you said, Joel, what is the better Euro civilization game? Right now I'd probably answer Golden Ages. But that is mostly due, I think, a little bit to some of the stuff I explained in the walkthrough about the various civilizations. Now, if that could somehow be fixed or balanced a little bit, then I might lean Tapestry. Yeah. So it's been a while since I played Golden Ages. So I'm not going to compare like details of this game to that. But let's kind of jump into the issue with Tapestry. Now, the thing, again, that I talked about in the walkthrough at some great length, I think, is the civilization aspect. And I kind of showed you the two civilizations that were, to me, obviously not on the same page. They're not even the same planet in terms of like the power of the civilization into winning the game and scoring points. They're just not even in the same room. So that's a big problem for a lot of people. And to be honest, it's a big problem with me too. Now, for me, it's not a death knell for the game. It's not something like I'd put on my blacklist or anything like that. A couple of reasons. The main reason is the entire rest of the game is awesome. I talk a lot about that in the walkthrough. I like the technology cards, I like the Tapestry cards, I like the way Explore Territory, I like the way that they approach the non-combat side of it. That was something I was a little bit like, you know, because I like Clash of Cultures, which can be drastically combat heavy. And this one is really not. There is some, you know, area control. It is important. You got to time it a little bit. You don't necessarily want, you know, your area is getting conquered. That's going to kind of reduce your point scoring. But there's enough kind of stuff going on that forces you to not just like destroy somebody in terms of territory. There's no reason to do that. There is reason to take some territory over the game, but there's never a reason to just go and like demolish somebody's civilization and just take up all the territory they control. Not that I've seen, and maybe there's some niche case with certain civilizations, but from what I've seen, that's not the case. But it's still there, it's still important, so you do have to pay attention to it. So I like that aspect of it. Now, I did talk about the weird sort of technology order of the tech cards and the Tapestry cards. That I actually really like. I love that you can have industrialism and then you learn how to sail or whatever the thing is. Because the rulebook even kind of says this, where it's like, hey, this is not planet Earth in its history. It's not trying to recreate that. This is some other planet. And it gives it like a weird mystical fantasy vibe, because even the civilizations that you're taking, it's like you're taking the merrymakers and the traders and the mystics and all this stuff. They're not like real things. Like civilizations aren't these monolithic things. You know, it's not like your entire civilization is just into trading and yours are just into military. You know, not necessarily, but most civilizations, like, there's multifaceted things. But because they sort of like kind of tried to get at an essence of a civilization and tried to, you know, sort of go after that, it feels sort of fantastical in a way, because they're very cartoonish. It's like a cartoon version of a civilization. Like, here's a military civilization, and they're just, you know, they're a bunch of military jerks, and, you know, these are really into all these different things. These ones just want to have a party. So it feels like a very fantasy kind of thing. So the fact that the technologies and things aren't necessarily in like the right scientific order of way things would be discovered kind of lends itself to that. And I actually kind of like that, because like, you don't always have to have you know, historical civilization. I like that it sort of, you know, punched a little bit of a hole in those walls and things like that. And it's sort of it's more like commenting on the concept of civilization and how those things kind of progress, which isn't always like the cleanest thing in the world. It only feels clean because we're like looking back on it sometimes, I think. But whatever, that's a philosophical thing. I don't care if I'm right even on that. But I like that aspect, and I almost kind of wish the game would like lean more into the fantasy. Like, if this was actually like a fantasy civilization game, so you had like mystical, I don't know, whatever, elves and dwarves or whatever, not even that, just different things that was like, it was clearly not human, because this is still human. Everything on the card looks like stuff from our world and our history. But if they had like leaned in that more, they could have got away with like some some of those kind of breakdowns in terms of the order. I don't know that they should have done that, but I think they could have done that, and it maybe that part wouldn't necessarily bother people, because everybody I've talked to and played it with and has commented on that whole kind of weird order thing. But I actually kind of don't mind that it didn't lean so hard into the fantasy, because it makes the game unique to me, and I really like that aspect of the game. And like I talked about in the walkthrough as well, the actual like mechanics of the game. Now let's throw out the balance of the civilization that you get at the beginning of the game. The rest of the mechanics, and all of the mechanics on most of the Civ cards, is really interesting. Like, it's a really fun game mechanically to play. And the kind of balance and give and take you have to take with, like, okay, this time I should really go military because, like, maybe I have the military civilization, duh, let's do that. Or maybe I've got the mystics, and I'm like, you know what's a good idea with the mystics? Let's make them a technology sort of thing. But maybe I could do exploration with them next time. And, you know, you can kind of plug and play a little bit of that mixing and matching of, you know, which Tapestry card should I do, and all that stuff. So all that stuff integrates really well, and the Tapestry deck itself is really cool. There's a lot of neat things in that deck that over the course of the several times that I've played it, you really, like, I feel like I'm really learning to be better at the game, because it's like, well, oh shoot, if I had done this, I know what civilization Billy's got, and I know what he's going to do. So if I play this, then I would be able to piggyback on him. But the first time you play, you're like, I don't know anything about this game, so this card doesn't seem very good to me. But then when you play it more, you're like, okay, now I can make better use out of these Tapestry cards. And I will grant a very small bit of that for some of the civilizations, but some of the others are 100% not as good as the others, not to beat a dead horse. But with the Tapestry cards, there is some fun room for exploration there, and how they can kind of interact with the different parts of the game. And that's where the game, to kind of sum everything up, is there is a lot to explore here, and there's a lot to kind of reinvestigate, come back to, play it time and again, play new civilizations. And like, I'm cool with actually playing a civilization that's not as good as others, because I don't really give a crap about winning this game. Because it's a lot like Caverna to me, where when I play Caverna, I don't give a crap about winning Caverna. I want to try this new little puzzle. And you're like, well, I won the game and I beat you. I'm like, cool, you go buy a cookie, you know. Like, I still had fun playing the game. Like, this is one of those certain games, 100%. Like, I'm in it to win it, and I'm like, I want to eke out every last point, and that's cool, and that's part of the game. To me, this is not that game. I'm not going to go into this and care about the balance of the civilizations a little bit. Like, I'm going to care a little bit, because it's, you know, that it's still there. But there's other games where I want to cut somebody's throat, and there's other games where I want to just have fun and put an engine together, and other games I want to have a story, and other games I want to cooperate. This is one of those things where I want to kind of throw an engine together, kind of get a little bit of story sucked out of it, and then, you know, have fun with it. Because I think it is a rewarding game. The feedback loop of, like, whatever the endorphins is that's built into board game mechanics, it exists here. So that, I think, there's a lot to explore here, and I would recommend a game, not necessarily with the caveat, but just kind of the warning that says, if you're going to get in this and play and worry that you lost by 100 points, then don't get it and don't play it. If you're going to realize that it's very possible that whoever won the game had a much better civilization than you did, then cool, that's okay. Because I think there's enough kind of going on that you can sort of play. And again, you might say, well, that's a little bit of a solitaire way to play the game. Yeah, but there's still interactions and things that are going to happen. It's just not really going to affect who wins the game, I think. And I know, and I thought a lot about this. And it's like, well, am I giving the game a pass? I'm like, well, no, because I'm explaining everything. It's up to you whether or not you give it a pass. Like, it's not me. I'm telling you exactly what I think. So, like, yeah, I guess I'm giving it a pass, 100%, because the game, 91% of the game, well, let's say like 86% of the game is great. The Civ balance is not hot at all. But I do have a hope, because in the rulebook it says we're going to handicap certain civilizations basically with victory points at some point. I think that's all right. That's probably fine. I'd probably prefer like tiers or something, like I mentioned in the walkthrough. Like there are 16 of them, so maybe you divide them into tiers of 5 or 6. Doesn't really add up. But you could have like 6 civilizations that are primo competitive tiers, and then you just shuffle those up and give them out, and one you throw away, and then the next tier 2 and tier 3, that would be cool. I feel like this game is like, there's an expansion here. I mean, they show you 6 players on the board. That would be a tight board, that's for sure. But I think that'd be cool. Like, I'd be into playing it with 6 players. And I think there's probably I feel like there's a mechanic here that was left out. Not cynically, not in any kind of way to milk anybody, which a lot of people sometimes think. But because I think one, approach that Stonemaier has for games is to kind of make it a very accessible game that you could play, with sort of more casual gamers, kind of a next step game. And I think this is very much that. There's a little bit kind of going on. But it would be kind of cool if there was like, if they also denoted like, these are the basic civs for your first game, then that would be neat. Because some of them are a little bit, I mean, there's one civ in there, it's like you have to have played this like 5 times to know if I think it's the Mystics actually, that, if you're going to do anything good with them. And even the Heralds or whatever it was that I played with the other day. So that kind of could have been broken out a little bit more. And the community and stuff like that will probably come up with those kind of breakdowns. And I fully expect an expansion of more civilizations. So if you add like another 16 in there, and then you had them tiered out, then I think the game would be really good. I mean, I think it's pretty good anyway, but I think it would be, amazing. Like, the first couple times I played this, it was like, this is going to be somewhere in my game of year list. But then after the last couple plays, I was like, can't make it because of that civ issue. I just can't do it. Because it should be better balanced or clarified what these civilizations are for, because that's going to be frustration for people. So the other thing, the expansion idea though, just to kind of reminisce, you can close the video if you like now, because I've gotten my thoughts out. I do feel like there could be some more like an economic type of thing that's happening between the players, some kind of trading aspect. Not necessarily like a freeform thing. Well, I'll trade you a worker if you give me a culture or something like that, or I'll trade you this tapestry card if you give me that technology card, that kind of thing. Like, I think that might be kind of interesting, but this game doesn't really lend itself to like open-ended trading like that. But it feels like there should be some sort of like trading aspect. Now there's some of that in some of the civilizations. They kind of work around that a little bit. But I feel like that could be a more general thing, because the game kind of leans into some of that sharing of technology and ideas, and I think I could really dial in on that. But again, I don't like the Monday morning quarterback, because I really don't know what the process was that they went to make this game. But yeah, so final closeout, do I recommend? Yeah, pretty much. But you just got to know that if you're going to be super competitive about it, then whatever, don't get it. But if you try it, I would say, see if you like it, and see if you can get in the actual game flow and the mechanics. If you can, then I would recommend it. Because to me, the winning and losing of this isn't really necessarily all of the point, although it kind of should be the point of this style of game. I mean, that should be a big part of it. But just figuring out the kind of weaving of the tapestries and the civilizations and the technology and everything together in different ways is enjoyable enough for me. I'm going to hang on to it. Hope there's an expansion. Hope there's some clarification, whether it comes from the publisher or the community or what. I think it's just like right on that cusp of being like a great game. Like Viticulture, first time I played that was really cool and I liked it a lot. It needed that expansion. It needed that second edition to come and bring things in. So I think this one, not to just cliche that together like it's some kind of thing with Stonemaier games, but I feel like this is another case where it needs just something else to just kick it up to the stratosphere. At one point, it should be an amazing game at that point, so we'll see. But anyway, that's Tapestry. A lot of folks asked me to review it. You can see I'm a little conflicted, but I said I would review it. So that's what I did. Okay, take care, thanks.